It's a very hot summer right now. Last season it rained the entire summer in this mountain. And the locals were telling me that when you're a farmer, it's very difficult because they live off agriculture. And in the winter, the cows and the cattle eat hay, grass. That grass has to be stored during summer months. So what they're doing right now is they are storing all the grass into a barn because it's very dry, and it's very easy when the grass is dry to store it for the winter. Last summer, it rained the entire summer. And when the grass is wet, I don't need to make a long explanation you realize that it's much harder to take wet grass into a barn because it decays much faster. It's harder to work. And as a result, I'm holding a little piece of rock. This rock is completely dusty. The whole trails are dusty. When it doesn't rain, everything becomes like a piece of dust. You get a black shirt, in 10 minutes, it's full of dust. And you don't realize it minute by minute, but you look 10 minutes later and you're pretty much dusted. So I'm holding this piece of rock to talk about freedom. It's the goal of this post to talk about freedom with one question. Are we free? Do we have free will? Or are we determined? Determined meaning, deterministic in philosophy means that we don't really choose what happens to us. We think we choose, we may think we choose, but we don't. Spinoza wrote a long time ago a small story about freedom, and the story was about a rock, which is why I'm holding this rock. He said, pretend I hold this rock and I throw this rock into the air. The rock is going to fly out, it's going to go up, then it's going to go down, and it's going to crash. So there we go. Nobody here. Not dangerous. So now that the rock has flown, Spinoza tells us that if the rock had a conscience like we humans do, it would probably find a way to justify rising and then falling. It would find a way, it would rationalize the fact that it went up and then with gravity it went down, and it would find some will. It would find some freedom, perhaps, in something that has nothing to do with freedom. It's just that it got thrown in the air and then it landed, and that's just physics. The story ends with Spinoza telling us that we humans are like this, that we're not necessarily free all the time, but it's inside of us. We like to explain events, and we like to have our conscience and to think that we impact much of our lives. And Spinoza tells us that perhaps the biggest moment of freedom, the strongest moment of freedom, is when we realize that in some cases we are like the rock, that we realize that we are not free, and the fact that we can comprehend this, that we can comprehend that we are not always free, but we think that we are, this carves, the fact that we're not free, this carves the awareness of our condition. And that awareness is perhaps the true freedom, right? Which is being able to reflect on what is part of circumstances. So that's Spinoza, right? It's somebody's opinion. Philosophers are just like us. They're like you. They're like me. They're like the guy who is going to walk by every now and then here. They're human beings. There's something to complement that thought from Spinoza, which is that there are many other times when everything is up to us, and that we can decide that we interpret life as things are in our control, And we do not depend on circumstances as much as other times. Circumstances are part of life, but they're not 100% of life. And that when we have control over something, this is perhaps the other moment of freedom, which is realizing that it is really up to us and that we can make changes when we need to make changes